Hey, welcome back to Cards and Comics, and today I have a new series I'm starting, and it's really based on the Willie Mays video I made, which I'll put a little link here in the video, and where I compared Willie Mays to Hank Aaron and Mickey Mantle in terms of card value. And so now I've taken the idea and I'm going to do it for multiple players and multiple years of cards, and I am comparing a player that, let's say is very high in value compared to another player who I think should be either equally high in value or underrated compared to that player, based on his stats, based on comparable careers, or just other issues or factors that would make the cards undervalued. And so today I'm going to start with Tom Seaver versus Nolan Ryan. And I'm going to look at, the population reports. I'm going to look at the average pricing through VCP of their cards from basically the rookie cards through 1980, and see if there's any cards of Tom Seaver that I think are highly undervalued compared to using Nolan Ryan kind of as a base, and kind of setting up the whole idea that there could be undervalued Hall of Famers out there, especially based on our new understanding of sabermetrics and how value of a player should be done. So, to set the stage, so Nolan Ryan, for people who haven't gone into the stats, he's a career WAR of 83.6 in 27 seasons, and he's the all-time leader in strikeouts, walks, and hits per 9 innings pitch, which basically means that he was great at missing bats and striking people out, but he also was kind of wild and walked a lot of people. And so, in the stat guys will talk about FIP, which is a measure of things like strikeouts and how effective they are as a pitcher. But his win-loss record, which isn't as relevant as things such as his, ERA and how many runs he allowed to score, which created a situation where he was never really considered the best pitcher in his league at any point, and so he had 0 Cy Youngs. And also 20th career WAR shows that even though he was a great pitcher, 20th all time is still really good. He wasn't like top 4 or 5, and his cards are definitely very expensive for a pitcher who's not in the top 10, let's say. Now take Tom Seaver, who's actually in the top 10 for all-time WAR. He played 7 less seasons, but accumulated a much higher WAR value, and strikeouts he's 6th all time, but he's still almost 2,000 below Nolan Ryan. And walks, he's much lower than Nolan Ryan, which helps his, obviously his WAR. And his hits per 9 innings pitch, shows that, Nolan Ryan definitely was much better at missing bats, thus his numerous no-hitters. But overall, Tom Seaver was definitely considered to be the best pitcher in his league multiple times. In fact, winning 3 Cy Youngs. So again, this kind of blew up by going on Fangraphs, who've got in the sabermetric community, there's been a lot of articles about how overrated Nolan Ryan is. And in the card world, I relate this to being, kind of how his pricing is. Nolan Ryan is definitely considered, from a modern era, from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s era, to be, pretty much the most expensive pitcher in terms of value, in terms of card value. But we just saw where he's definitely not considered that from a sabermetric perspective. His WAR all time doesn't support that. And this article, which I'll also post a link to, will kind of go into reasons why he was kind of a good a Hall of Famer, but not one of the all time greats. And a lot of articles are dedicated to this. It's not hard to find one. Now, the way I did this, I took his cards, starting from rookie cards, so Nolan Ryan and Tom Seaver. They virtually had the same amount of cards in terms of this time period, except for, Tom Seaver has a rookie in 67. And I took their PSA 8 value, so I did current comp versus what they were at the end of 2019 and 2020, and to see kind of how the valuation has changed over time in the last 3 years. So you can see that in general terms, the values have changed pretty similarly, where some years are much higher than others. Now, Tom Seaver, you have to also look at that it always starts with a lower base. So as we look at pricing here, the one thing that stands out in my mind, besides the doubling and sometimes tripling in values or close to it, is the 69 Tom Seaver is really worth paying attention to here, because in 2020 the card was 550, and in 2021 the card's comping at 509. So it's actually gone down since the 2020 into 2020 to now, where a lot of cards have not done that. In fact, a lot of cards have still gone up tremendously in value since last December. And so this card is definitely an outlier, and compared to the Nolan Ryan from the same year, which is worth 3 times more. Whereas beforehand it was worth twice as much. So the Nolan Ryan has really outpaced the Seaver in the 69 card, from 2020 to now, really quite a bit. And it's kind of interesting how that's happened. Now, if you go to the pop reports, one thing you'll notice right off the bat is that 69 Tom Seaver is the lowest pop of any 60s Seaver or Nolan Ryan card, and in some cases by half. But going back to the pricing, it's actually the cheapest Tom Seaver card or Nolan Ryan card in the 60s. It's the lowest pop with the lowest price point, and it's and compared to the same year Nolan Ryan, which has a much higher pop count by over 500 cards, it's 1/3 the price. So for that reason, I would consider it to be the winner of this comparison, as being a card I would invest in that I think is undervalued, is the 69 Tom Seaver. Moving to 1970 through 72, looking at these pop reports, you can see at the bottom that the 70 Nolan Ryan has kind of gone nuts, along with the 72. Those cards have gone up almost by factors of 3, or the 70 Tom Seaver has too. But again, that card started out with a very small base, $65 to $192. It's definitely not as impressive as the 72 Nolan Ryan, for example, or the 70 Nolan Ryan going from $300 to $1,100. That's an $800 increase versus $130. So I think the Nolan Ryan's making a lot of money. If you'd invested in that 70 Nolan Ryan and kept it till now, you made a lot more money. Now, the 71 set is always tough to really look at, because the demand is so high and it's hard to get, they're just hard to grade. And so even though the Ryan and Seaver in 71 gone up in value almost exactly the same, you can still see the price differences, virtually $800. Now, the 72 is, to me, the most interesting card to look at, because the Nolan Ryan is outpacing the Seaver by quite a bit, over 60% more. However, and it's also more than double the price. But if you look at the pop report, the 72 Seaver actually has 1/4 the pop as the 72 Nolan Ryan. And it's very comparable to the 71 Seaver, which is, to a lot of people, a low pop for a PSA 8 in the 71 set. You can see the 71 Nolan Ryan has 270 more 8s than the 71 Seaver. The 71 Seaver, by price comparison, has tremendously increased in value since 2019, going from $300 to $650. But comparatively, the 72 has a very similar pop count, and it's virtually worth 1/3. And even compared to that 72 Nolan Ryan, it's a tremendous value. And so for that reason, I think the 72 Nolan Ryan is a huge, possibility for investment for myself, because of the low pop, the comparable pop to 71, and the fact that it is a very inexpensive card. It's on par with the 70, $30 difference. And if I was going to compare the two, obviously with 1/3 the pop count, I would choose the 72 Seaver to be my card I would invest in. All right, next up is 73 through 75, and so this is the last time I'm going to use a PSA 8 comparison. In this time period is where cards became a little higher pop. So the 8 actually gets a little even tough, because there's so many of these. But the one card to me that sticks out is how the 74 Seaver really has kept pace, and not only in terms of value, but is really outpacing the Nolan Ryan in terms of value gain. And for people who don't know, the 74 is the horizontal card, and it's the second year they did horizontal. They did horizontal in 73, but those photos aren't very good. But the 74 horizontal photos are much better for Topps, and the Seaver is an all-time classic, and I think it's definitely one of those great cards. Now, the 75 Seaver is another card that has definitely low buy-in cost, but the next slide will show you why I don't think it's an investable card. As you can see, the 74 Seaver by far has the lowest pop count, one third of the Ryan from the same year. But compared to that 75 Seaver, which was again, a cheaper card, it's half the pop count. And you can see at $184, that 74 Seaver, seems like a card that you could pick up and make a good investment. It's outpacing the Ryan. I think at some point it could be a more valuable card than Nolan Ryan. It to me is the only card on this list one and another card that would be the only two cards that would theoretically in the future be more expensive than Nolan Ryan. So the 74 Tom Seaver to me is the winner, because I think at some point it is going to be more expensive just because of the pop count and how just cool the card is. I think it's going to eventually be worth more than the Nolan Ryan. Now, moving 76 through 78, this is where we go to Psa Nines, because the 8 valuations are so low in some cases, especially for Tom Seaver. And the pop counts get to be so high that I think the 9 becomes an easier card to mark. Now, this is another year where you've got two pretty big extremes. You've got the fact that 76, 9 is, worth, almost 4 times, or sorry, 3.5 times what the Seaver is, the Nolan Ryan versus the Seaver. But you got this interesting dichotomy here where this 77 Tom Seaver and a PSA 9 is worth more than the Nolan Ryan. So I mentioned that there was 2 cards that I think are going to be either worth more or continue to be worth more than Nolan Ryan from a Tom Seaver card perspective, and this card already is there, and that's the 77 Tom Seaver. At $878, it is by far more expensive, gone up more in value, and has kept its more expensive status from 2019 to now. It's kept that pace, so I think it's going to be a card that continues to be worth more than Nolan Ryan, and I'll show you why in a second. But then you got this really, really strong 78 Nolan Ryan price. $1,600 versus $40. Now, so the big key here is pop count. So I think you've got a pop count of 82 on that 77 Seaver, 121 on that 78 Nolan Ryan. That's why those two prices are so extreme. The 76 Seaver definitely has an okay pop count. It's $250, so comparative to the Ryan, it seems cheap from a set, that's pretty popular, I think, anyway. I really like the 76 set. So, I'll caveat this. So the winner, in my opinion, if you can afford it, will be the 77 Seaver. At $800, it's a little pricey for me to think it's an investable card. It's already gone up quite a bit. To me, it's already worth more than the Nolan Ryan. So to me, I can't really recommend it to be the card to invest in, because to me, I think it's kind of fully realized, but it's a great card. And if I had the money, I would definitely get one. But I think the 76 Seaver at that price point is comparable to the Nolan Ryan. And again, over 1/3 the value. So to me, 76 Seaver is an investable card, and I don't recommend the 78 Seaver just because of that high pop count in a 9. 7 times the amount of the Nolan Ryan. To me, even at $40, that's not a card I would buy into. I think the 76 Seaver is something that if I was looking at a card from this time period, I would get the Seaver, and the 76 Seaver in a 9. Okay, now 79 through 80. So these are the last 2 cards, and again, the Seaver is a very low base. The Nolan Ryan cards are very comparable in price from 79 to 80. And if you look at the price gains, even though Seaver is higher, it's just because it's such a low base. So really the pop count tells a story here. And you can see that the 1980 Seaver, basically has half the pop count as any other card on this list. To me, price-wise, it's $35. It's a cheap buy-in, and it's easily the winner in this list here. That for $35, you can invest in comparatively a lower pop card from this time period of a player that some people think is a better player. And again, at $35, it's a pretty cheap buy-in. So overall, as I look at price comparisons and the percentages that the cards have gone up, the average percent gain for Nolan Ryan during this time period was 269% per card. And the average cost went up from $507 in 2019 to $1,300. So if you were to have all these cards, your average cost would have been $507 in 2019. And today you would have made, on average, $800 per card. So from that standpoint, Nolan Ryan was definitely a good investment in 2019. So if you look at the Tom Seaver cards, they're actually keeping pace in terms of gains with the Nolan Ryan. A little bit higher, but you can say it's virtually the same. And the average cost per card, you would have gone from $238 to $566, so you'd have made over $300, while Nolan Ryan would have made you over $800. So again, the Nolan Ryan cards were definitely going to make you more money, but the higher buy-in card cost per card is definitely a factor. But that just shows that the Seaver cards are definitely going up in value. They're keeping pace with Nolan Ryan. So, overall winners and losers here, I just got winners, no losers. For best value, to me, I've got the 72 Seaver. Again, 1/4 the pop count as the Nolan Ryan, and pop count almost as low as the 71 tops. $224 is basically half of what the Ryan is bringing, and it's got an even lower pop count than the 69 Seaver, which we just talked about being the lowest pop of any 60s card. So, it's a pretty rare card. For best investment, I've got the 69 Seaver. And the reason why I really think of that it's the best investment is it's a 60s card. 60s cards are just a little more iconic than 70s cards. It's just people think that way in the vintage world. And again, it's half the pop count of any other 60s Seaver or Ryan card. It's the cheapest of any of them, and the price is actually lower in 2021 than it was in 2020. So to me, it's got room to grow. So there it is, guys. Hope you like it. Hope you can take some of this information, and if you're going to buy some Tom Seaver cards, this gave you some idea of what to invest in and what cards are out there that might be priced low, and hopefully it inspire you a little bit. And I'll be back with another review of 2 players in the future, and hopefully you liked it. Bye.